This is episode number 5. My name is Paula, and I am one of the paranormal investigators in the group. And I'm also joined by Alex, who is my ghost hunting partner here in Northern Virginia. We run a group called Dark Hollow Ghost Stalkers. This evening's live stream is on Ouija boards. I did a poll in the group a couple of weeks ago, like right before Christmas, and there was a lot of interest in this subject. So I wanted to give everyone a little bit of the history of not just what we now call Ouija boards, but what were referred to as spirit boards or talking boards in the past. Tonight's subject about Ouija boards, I really want to give you some history, a little bit of legend, uses, the safe use. If you insist on using one, how you can use one safely. I want to really point out the dangers of a Ouija board, and I also want to go over an actual case that Alex and I investigated in Virginia, and it was due to the use of a Ouija board. That's what set everything off. So as far as the history of Ouija, the earliest documentation of the use of like a spirit board or a talking board was actually in China, and it was in 1100 AD. Most people don't realize that this form of divination is that old. And in China, it was called Fuji, which was planchette writing. This is actually documented in historical documents from the Song Dynasty. And it was used in necromancy, which is a form of like magic where you're trying to interact with and control spirit. And it's also was used for communing with spirit, with the dead. It was highly controlled to like institutions of learning, and it was subsequently banned by the Qing dynasty because of the dangers that they felt were associated with necromancy, with communing with the dead in this manner. Various authors also said that similar methods of mediumship and spirit writing were practiced in ancient India, Greece, Rome, and medieval Europe. Spirit boards or talking boards really came into fashion in the Victorian era. And the Victorian era, of course, started with Queen Victoria's reign in 1836 or 1837. And it ran until the early 1900s, like 1920, I believe. In the Victorian era, the average age, the life expectancy was only 50 years old. So, you know, if you stop and think about that versus the life expectancy today, you know, that's a big significant difference. Victorians had an absolute obsession with death. They had an extremely high mortality rate with their children. So a lot of times mediums used spirit boards to communicate with the dead. Now, because Victorians were so obsessed with communicating with the dead and with the occult, there were a lot of hucksters and fakes, etc. during this time. So mediums in the Victorian era had boards that had the alphabet A through Z, numbers 0 through 9, yes, no, on them. But what they did instead was rely on spirit to, they ran through the alphabet and the numbers one by one, and then relied on spirit to give a knock or, you know, bump the table or move something on the table. And this really led to a lot of people being taken advantage of. And it also was an opportunity. People got bored because having to run through that many letters and numbers, you know, to get a word spelled out or something spelled out, it took a long time. People got bored. They could not be bothered with it. There was also another board that used a planchette type device, but instead of the modern day planchette that has like a pointer to it, it had a pencil inside of it, and the mediums used it for like automatic writing. And this didn't really come into favor either, because the spirit writing or the automatic writing was so hard to read, etc., etc. In America, the Civil War era really amped up the nation's obsession in the United States with communicating with the dead, especially after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. Mary Todd Lincoln lost a child, and then she also lost her husband, and she had an absolute obsession with trying to communicate with the dead after she left the White House. So that kind of obsession really spurned growth in this area, and I'm not going to say growth in a good way. So a lot of hucksters played on the emotions of grieving widows and grieving mothers during this era, especially in the United States, because there were so many, husbands and sons killed during the Civil War. So many children were lost due to starvation, etc. So it was, not a particularly nice time to, rely on a medium, because more than likely you were going to get taken by a huckster. The New York, Daily Tribune reported on a new kind of spirit board being used in 1886, and it was being used in Ohio, and it resembled what we now think of as a Ouija board. It was 18 by 20 inches, and it, showed the alphabet, numbers, the words yes, no, goodbye, and hello on it. It said good evening and good night. And then it also had a little table 3 to 4 inches high with 4 legs that spirit used to identify letters. And the New York Daily News actually gave you instructions on how to make one at home. So when we think about the modern day Ouija board, it was actually the planchette, what we think of as the planchette now. The patent was filed for it in 1890 in Baltimore, Maryland by a guy named Ouija Board. and the patent was granted in 1891. Now, this is in the United States. Earlier patents were granted in the UK and in, I want to say, France than this patent. Bond was actually an attorney and an inventor, and he held several patents. So he really wasn't into, doing anything other than inventing stuff. But he partnered up with a couple of other investors, and this Ouija board was produced by the Kennard Novelty Company, and it was marketed as a toy. And Kennard said that Ouija was ancient Egyptian for good luck, but actually an employee of the Kennard Novelty Company took over that company when Kennard left, and he actually coined the term Ouija board, and he said that it was the combination of oui and ja in German and oui in French, both meaning yes, and that's how the board was named. Fuld passed away in 1926. He held the patents for the board and the planchettes in the United States. In 1944, just to tell you how popular these boards became as a novelty and as a toy, one department store in 1944 sold over 50,000 of these boards in 1 month. Now, if you stop and think, 1944, 50,000 Ouija boards in 1 month. Not 1 month, 6 months. That is a tremendous amount when you realize that we were still in World War II. There were limited resources. People, didn't fritter away money like we do now. It's an amazing statistic when you stop and think about it. And Fuld's estate actually sold the Ouija board rights and the patents to Parker Brothers in 1966. Now, this is where the Americanized version of the Ouija board comes in, because Parker Brothers, I remember when I was a kid, you could see the commercials on TV, before Christmas time and everything. It was marketed as a child's toy. It was a game. So in 1967, Parker sold over 2 million Ouija boards. There is nowhere that they have like a cumulative count. They really can't accurately give anybody a count of how many Ouija boards have been mass produced to date. In 1991, Hasbro bought the rights from Parker Brothers, and they still own all the patents and everything. And a lot of times they see sales spikes in Ouija boards after Hollywood produces movies like The Exorcist, The Conjuring, blah, 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 blah. There's a huge, when there's an increase in interest in the paranormal and the popularity of, television shows like Ghost Adventures, Ghost Hunters, Paranormal State, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you see an increase in the use of Ouija boards even today. Now, Ouija boards can be used as a divination tool. And I'm going to, if you've ever watched one of these episodes, I am full of caveats and warnings and disclaimers. A lot of people believe that Ouija boards or spirit boards can be used to communicate with the dead and be a divination tool if they are used properly. And to properly use a Ouija board, you really need 2 to 5 people. You need one person to be the querent or the leader of the group. You need to have one person that doesn't really participate, that is the documenter of the group. In other words, they keep track of all the notes of everything that went on. And then you have like 3 participants that provide energy. Now, there are some things that people must do. Everyone who participates must remain calm at all times, regardless of what happens. They have to be focused. Spirit uses their energy to, move the planchette, to spell out answers, answer yes or no questions. And the best time, most people think the best time to use a Ouija board is after 10 p.m. Now, if you insist on using a Ouija board, there are some precautions that you have got to take. Number 1 is don't ever use a Ouija board in your own home or on your own property. Do not. I don't know how many times I have to say that. Do not use a Ouija board in your own home. You have to protect yourself and all participants. So you really need to be fairly adept at shielding yourself from spirit, especially if you are a sensitive or a psychic medium. If you are not adept at doing that, then you have got to stay away from this method of divination. Do not do it. Please, I'm begging you, do not do it. You really need to have a protective circle. In other words, whether you are a witch or, Wiccan, we cast protective circles. You can have a circle of salt, something of that nature. If you start to get an aggressive response, you have got to close the board and shut the session down immediately. And I'm going to tell you exactly how to do that, like an emergency, shut off valve, so to speak, for the Ouija board. But you cannot freak out. People cannot get up and run away before the board has been properly closed down. If they do that, you have left a portal open. You have left people open to attachments. If you can't remain calm in something like that, don't do it. Just don't do it, please. To properly open a board, you have to properly open a board and you have to properly close a board. You have to greet spirit. You have to be respectful. You have to remain serious. It's not a game. It's not a toy. Regardless of how these things are marketed, they're not toys. It's serious. Don't act a fool. Do not ever antagonize spirit during a Ouija board session. If spirit doesn't want to talk, simply close the session, close the board, and stop. Don't try to force things. The best way to conduct a session is to ask simple questions. You have to give spirit ample time to answer. If you've watched some of our other videos, it takes a lot of energy for spirit to manifest and interact with you. Be respectful of that fact. They can't just go yes, no, like this in a split second. It takes time for them to generate energy to be able to interact with you. And please do not antagonize spirit. You always want to be respectful. If you are a beginner, I really do not hope that if you are a beginner, you would even try this, but I know people out there are going to do it anyway. You may not get anything to start with if you're a beginner because you're not really in tune with spirit. So don't get frustrated. Just simply close the board and try again another day if you really are serious about doing it. The best questions to ask to start off with are ones to get to know the spirit that you're talking to, such as the spirit's name, the age when they passed on, their date of death, their gender, and then you can begin to ask more detailed questions after that, like how they died, do they have a message for the group, or is there anything that they want from a living person? So you have to remain sincere and polite. If you have no intention of passing a message on or trying to find out whoever it is that they're trying to reach out and connect with, don't ask the question, because then you're letting spirit down, okay? Now, like I said, you properly open a board, you properly greet spirit, you properly close a board. This is essential. If you do not close a board, it is an open portal. It is an open invitation for everything good and bad to come right through that board and into your life and into the lives of the participants. It leaves you open to a lot of bad stuff, and I'll get into that. So to properly close a board, you have to say goodbye to spirit. You wish the spirit peace. And spirit should guide the planchette to goodbye at this point. If they don't, if spirit doesn't want to say goodbye at this point, this is when the leader of the group has to take over. And in a very firm voice, they have to say, I'm saying goodbye, and I wish for you to do the same, please. And at that point, the group moves the planchette to goodbye. The leader picks it up, slams it down, and breaks the bond with spirit. If spirit starts, you never, ever, I'm going to say this again, never use a Ouija board in your own home, and never go at it, you know, for like a couple of hours. Absolutely no more than an hour, hour and a half max. It's taxing on you. It's taxing on spirit. So now I'm going to put up the big dangers. If you start getting answers, there are emergency procedures that have to be taken if some of the following things start happening. If the room becomes heavy, or there is a foul odor present, like that of sewage or sulfur. If the spirit starts to swear or becomes agitated. If the members of the group become erratic or start to freak out about stuff. If you get answers that begin to spell out any of the following words, you have to immediately hit that emergency eject button procedure to close the board that I'm going to tell you about here in just a second. You don't want to ever do this in a friend's home. I would do it outside, Amy. I would not do this in anyone's home, anything like that. Absolutely not. I would do it outside. And not on anybody's property that lives there. You know, go to a public park or something like that, because you can just unleash the literally hell on somebody if you do it in a friend's home. You don't want to do it. If you get answers that begin to spell out any of the following words or anything that can fall into these kind of categories: hell, demon, death, trickster, Lucifer, devil, antichrist, 666 or 616, death, oh, I already said death once, Satan, and any of, kill, anything like that. You have to immediately close the board, and I'll tell you how to do that in the emergency procedure. So if Spirit starts doing figure 8s on the board, close the board immediately. If Spirit starts going to each of the 4 corners of the board, close the board immediately, because what's happening is they're trying to come through the board and out of the board. You've got to remember that a Ouija board is a portal, and you have to respect that fact. If Spirit starts going through the numbers or the alphabet in sequence, like 1, 2, 3, 4, A, B, C, D, if they get through the entire sequence and the sequence is completed, Spirit can come out of the board and escape. And like I said before, if Spirit starts swearing or becoming hostile. So now, the emergency board closing procedure, what I call the panic button, or the eject button. The leader has to immediately force that planchette to goodbye on the board. Then everyone has to say, "Goodbye, Spirit. We're ending the session. We wish you peace and goodbye." The leader will take the planchette off the board, slam it down, turn it over, and then turn over the Ouija board, and everybody needs to leave the area. This is serious stuff. It's nothing to be messed with. It's nothing to trifle with. Other cautions. Now, a lot of times, people freak out. They get one of these things. They use it once, get freaked out, and then they don't want it. So what do they try to do? They try to burn it. Well, guess what you just did? I have had people actually throw Ouija boards in their fireplaces in their homes and destroy them. Oh, for God's sake, don't do that. Don't ever, and I'm going to do this, one of my ever, never, never, never things. Don't ever, 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 never, ever, ever, ever burn a Ouija board. For all that is sacred in this world, do not destroy a Ouija board. Do not do it, for God's sake. Now, Ouija boards can be bound, and the portals in spirit of that board can be bound, and it can be buried off-site, never in your backyard, never on your property, anything like that. I just can't even. Let me say this. I have been a witch for a long time. I will not use a Ouija board as a means of divination. I am an adept at shielding myself as a psychic medium. I am an adept at warding my own home and at protecting my property, my pets, and those that I love. What about placing it on the steps of the church? You could probably give it to like the Catholic Church to do with, because church is hallowed ground. The Catholic Church would probably know what to do with it. Other churches may not. Other churches may just throw it on the burn pile, freak out, and not really know how to deal with it. But if you wanted to do something like take it to the church after it's been, bound and dealt with, and that's how you want to dispose of it, to take it to a church, then that's the way to do it. The other way is to, bury it off property, no trespassing, that kind of thing. The ideal thing is to, be able to bury it in a graveyard, but, digging in a graveyard is a felony where I live, so that kind of leaves that out unless you have like a family graveyard or something like that. Now, I've just said that don't ever, 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 never, ever, 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 ever do this. Okay. Alex and I performed an investigation on a house down in Mechanicsville, Virginia. And one of the members of the family had used a Ouija board, and Spirit had actually followed an individual in the family to different locations that they lived. And it eventually became a real problem for their daughter. And it's because the Ouija board was used and not properly closed. And it left a portal open. The child and the child's grandmother were being attacked. There were scratches, there were pushing and shoving, you know, nightmares, things of that nature. When we got down there, the very first thing that we did in the front yard, number one, the family not only wanted an investigation done, we actually I had to make 2 trips down there, one for the investigation, and then 2, after the investigation, the family wanted the house cleared or cleansed. First thing that we did when we got down there is we started a prayer circle in the front yard, and I immediately invoked the 4 archangels for protection. You know, we invoked Raphael, Gabriel, Oriel, and Michael, or Michael, for protection, because that you could just sense and feel the dark of this home. Alex began salting the perimeter of the main house. They had put their Rottweiler in the, I believe it was Rottweiler, it was a daggone big ass dog, I know that. They had put their dog in a detached garage, and that dog started going nuts when Alex started salting around the foundation of the house with sea salt. For those of you who have ever done any ghost hunting or anything like that, sea salt is a protective and cleansing thing that we use. When we went through the rooms with the homeowners, I actually did the sweep with the homeowners from room to room, and we used a combination of holy water and sea salt. Alex literally got gallons of water blessed by a chaplain at Fort Belvoir Army Garrison. That raised a few eyebrows. After, when I started going through and doing the banishing part of a house blessing ritual, and a house clearing and blessing is in essence a minor rite of exorcism in the Catholic Church. You need to remember that. When I started doing the sweep from upstairs with the homeowners, and saging, spraying a mixture of sea salt and holy water throughout the rooms. Attacks began on the homeowners. Attacks also began, like with crippling headaches, to members of the team that were present. We had to use the prayer to St. Michael, on a few occasions during this house clearing. And, you know, I am blessed in the fact that the angels were there with us, and they answered our calls for protection, and St. Michael answered our calls when we needed him. Mo and Alex were downstairs, and they, as you do a sweep, you leave the front door open so that the entities can literally be swept out of the house. Mo and Alex saw one kind of mist go out, and then another black mass came down. It was a spiral staircase, and then out the front door. We provided, Alex then went through the house. Alex is an ordained minister, and we sealed the house using prayers and English versions, basically, of a rite of exorcism, because none of us are proficient at speaking Latin. The homeowners were provided a CD of the investigation. Yeah, we used blessed oil and holy water with sage during the blessing part of the ritual. And each room was blessed, each window was sealed, each doorway was sealed. That house was locked down, cleared, and tight. Before we left, the homeowners were provided a CD with the evidence that was caught from the investigation that was done. And they were given very specific instructions on what they needed to do to ensure that the entities didn't come back, and that they didn't inadvertently invite the entity back in. Now, one of the entities was just your normal kind of everyday pissed off ghost. The other one was a demon. I am not going to give you the name of the demon. We do know the name of the demon because if you speak it out loud, you can invite it back in your daggone house. I personally do not want to deal with that thing, hag, again. They were told to, they were Christian faith. They were told to get anyone in the house who had not been baptized, specifically their daughter. We also told them to never review the evidence on the DVD in the home out loud, and to never invite spirit back in the home. In other words, don't use a daggone Ouija board ever again. Don't do anything, you know, smacking of, you know, ghost hunting or anything like that. Just don't do it in your own home. It's bad practice. Don't do it. Did I say don't use a Ouija board in your own home? Okay, that's about the 15th time I've said it. Dear Grandma decided that she wanted to show one of her friends the evidence that we caught. And she played it out loud for her friend on the DVD player. And literally, all hell broke loose in the house. And the attacks doubled down. When she played that DVD in the home, she invited that demon right back into the house and undid everything that we did. Also, when I'll get to that. After the attacks resumed, they were much more violent. The homeowner contacted Alex, and they were advised to contact the Catholic Church. Now, I don't know if any of you know this or not, but the Archbishop of Los Angeles, who was at the time Archbishop File, manages the exorcists that are assigned to the United States. There's only like 8 to 10 exorcists in the United States. Alex was then contacted by Father Dave Daly, D-A-L-Y. And if any of you who have watched like episodes of, I believe he was on Ghost Adventures, either this season or last season, he was in one of those Ghost Adventures shows. Father Daly contacted Alex and actually came to Alex's home and sat there for several hours and went through every shred of evidence that was caught at this house. And the Catholic Church was provided copies of the evidence that we got. In essence, our little band of misfit paranormal investigators were then soldiers of St. Michael. Now, after Dave Daly took care of everything, Alex was able to contact him, and all they said was that, things went well. Special Order of St. Michael, soldiers of St. Michael. Now, the thing is that the three of us, Mo, Alex, and I, when the demon was unleashed again, also began having basically the same dream and battling this hag. We were all repeatedly attacked in our dream states. We, in essence, had the same basic dream. We all had to call on St. Michael again to help us in our battles. It was no fun. It was no fun. Mo had these dreams for over a month after this happened. And I already, have PTSD. And this kind of set a PTSD flare up for me after, I got over and, doubled down my protections. And, I had the archangels with me you know, and it seems kind of a misnomer that a witch would invoke archangels, but this witch does. And Alex even had, you know, the recurring dreams of battling this, I'm going to call her a hag because that's what she is. So with that, you can tell that I get a little choked up and emotional talking about this. It was not fun. It really ticked me off that the homeowner did exactly what we told them not to, and then made us, in essence, targets for this demon because we had battled her and won once, and then she was mad and she doubled down on everybody involved. So my final cautions, if that was not enough to scare you away from ever using a Ouija board, I'm going to leave you with these final words. You have to remember that the Ouija board is a portal that you are opening to the spirit world, okay? And that is spirit good and evil. And you need to remember that demons and bad spirits are tricksters. They will try and lull you into a sense of security and then lower the boom on you. And literally, you know, God help you if it happens. I'm going to say, Marta just said, don't mess with what you don't know. Again, never use a board in your own home. Remember to close the board. If you're going to insist on using one, open them properly, close them properly. Failure to do so can result in infestation, attachments, oppression, and possession. And that was the subject of last week's live stream. And if you want to know about that and you want to get scared again, listen to me go on about that for an hour and a half. And that is one of the episodes that I just uploaded. It's in the Facebook group, but it's also on the YouTube channel, BYO Spirit Paranormal. I'm going to say it again. Never, ever destroy a Ouija board. You will release all the spirit, demons, whatever has entities have come through that board, you will release them on you if you destroy a board. And you never, ever want to bury a Ouija board on your own property, because that's just crazy. You know, that's, you know, kind of like my mom used to say, don't go to the bathroom where you're eating. You don't want if you bury it on your property, it's still your problem. I don't own one. I won't own one. I won't use one. And I will tell you, when I was going through my training as a witch with my high priestess, I absolutely refused to attend the session on Ouija boards. I would not deal with it. And that was at, you know, a remote location. It was at my HP shop, and I did not care. I didn't want to go, and I didn't. And I will not have anything to do with them. I do a lot of forms of divination. That is not one of them. If you are desperate to contact a loved one, someone that has crossed over, contact Marta for a reading. Do not use a Ouija board unless you are extremely adept as a psychic medium, and you are adept at protecting yourself, protecting everyone around you, protecting your home, don't do it. And I just can't say that enough. So if I haven't scared the socks off of you by now, I really appreciate everybody coming in and interacting with us, asking questions, supporting BYO Spirit and everything paranormal, supporting Marta and what she's trying to do in building the group and building the community. I really appreciate everything, you know, my buddy Alex does. I appreciate Marta. I appreciate all of you. We're going to have another paranormal live stream next week at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I will post in the group on a Monday or Tuesday what the subject will be. And until then, go in love and light, everybody, and have a great night. Bye.